Okay, today we're going to talk about the skull base anatomy. So, skull base or not skull base, we have something complex here. Before we start talking about the skull base, we need to say very simple stuff. Skull base is very complex area. The skull base we can divide in endocranial and extracranial surface, okay? The skull base anatomy is composed for different bones, okay? When we see the human anatomy of the skull base in endocranial surface, we're gonna divide in floors or in fossa, one anterior, medial, and posterior fossa or floor. But the skull base is a composition of different bones, and we need to talk about all of them and later all of them together. So the first bone we're going to talk is the frontal bone. So the frontal bone is located in the anterior surface of the skull and above to the bones of the face. It's symmetrical and it's a central bone. The frontal bone is articulated with different bones. Posteriorly, it's going to articulate with this is an sphenoid, with the Ethmoid Bone, also with the parietal bone. It's going to be superior, the front is going to be superior to the Ethmoid Bone. The Ethmoid is going to be here. This is the Ethmoid here. I'm going to talk about this area now. The Ethmoid there. The nasal bones, we're gonna see here, nasal bones, the lacrimal bones there, laterally here, and the maxillar bone, okay? Let's make the maxillar in blue. And the maxillar bone here. Okay, and the maxillar, yes, this is like a maxillar. And the maxillar. Those are the bones which the frontal bone it's articulated. Again, ethmoid, sphenoid, those two are in pairs. Also, well, if we consider, because yes, we can say three in pairs, because we can also name the maxillar bone like an impar. It's an impar bone. It's one impar. But remember, the maxillar bone are composed by two pieces joined together, okay? But usually it's they are fusionate together, okay? Let's say three impar bones. Posterior, sphenoid, ethmoid, and inferior, the maxillar bone. Three impar bones. Pairs bone, posterior and superior, the parietal bones. We have the parietal bones. We have the nasal bones. And we have the lacrimal bones. So, those are the bones which the frontal bones is articulated. So, the frontal bone is divided in the upper portion or superior portion. It's called the squama here. You can see. This is the Squamous Frontalis. It's a vertical, okay? It's a part of the cranial vault. The other is inferior and is horizontal. It's horizontal and it's called horizontal portion or orbitonasal portion or orbitonasal surface of the frontal bone. So we can imagine the frontal like a T, inverted T, where this part here, this vertical part is the squama, and this horizontal part down there is the orbitonasal surface here. Okay, so this is the first step to understand. So the vertical portion, the squama, contains an anterior part or exocranial. This is a convex area, and also the opposite part is an endocranial surface. It's a concave area. So the exocranial surface corresponds to the intertegument, from which is separated by the frontal muscle. We have this is the frontal muscle here. Yes, that's a muscle. It's convex and smooth. All its extension can be seen on this surface, above to the root of the nose to the middle of the frontal methopic suture. You see here, this is the methopic suture, which is usually disappear in the adults. So above this is an eminence called glabella here. It's glabella or middle frontal bulge, but we usually call it glabella. So this is the glabella here. Laterally, we're gonna have two rounded eminences and can be observed, which are located below to the lateral frontal protuberance. Okay, lateral protuberance here. Okay, here. So the cutaneous surface is convex and it's smooth, all the area except from a small and concave surface that's oriented laterally, belonging to the temporal fossa is here. You see this area here, okay, you can see it here also. See this area, you see here. Yes, so you see this is no convex area. So this surface present from the middle to the lateral. Okay, we're gonna start from the middle line to lateral. Okay, to talk about all the elements. We say before we have here the methopic suture. It's connect the two parts of primitively of the frontal bone. Okay, in the beginning was two frontal bones as the maxilla of the maxilla, two frontal bones, and they join together, and the methopic suture is the remain. Okay, as we say, superiorly to the methopic suture we have the glabella or eminence frontal middle. Okay, later to the side of this prominent blunt is we have the superciliary arc. Okay, superciliary arc, which extends laterally and slide above the corresponding lateral ends of the glabella. Okay, above the superciliary arc, which correspond to the eyebrow usually. Okay, so superciliary arc, and it's making black. Yes, this is you see, we have the eyebrow there. Okay, but what happened here? We're gonna have in the supraciliary arc, we're gonna have the supraorbital notch, or sometimes we have a foramen, and it's the supraorbital foramen. So this foramen or the notch, they are excavated by the branch of the supraorbital artery. Okay, for example, you can see here number 3, you see here, this is the supraorbital notch, but when we have the foramen, sometimes we have the foramen. Okay, here. Okay, for example, here you see the foramen. Okay, and now in there you can see the notch. So this supraciliary arc, I'm gonna finish here. We're gonna see this in the temporal face plate, or here, or temporal fossa of the frontal bone. So this face plate of the frontal bone help to make this area. We call it, much later we're gonna talk about it. It's the temporal fossa. Okay. So you can see here, this is the posterior surface or endocranial surface of the Squamous Frontalis. Here you can see here. Okay, this is a concave area. It's related with all extension to the frontal lobes. All these frontal lobes gonna be here. So in the middle we can observe from superior to inferior a vertical groove. You're gonna see it very marked here. You see here this groove. You can see it also here, this groove. This is it's a channel. It's the superossetal sinus groove. On each one of side of this groove, we can observe it. Some depression, we call it arachnoid granulation. Okay, you can see it here. You see all these points? There are all these depression side by side of this superossetal sinus groove. So you can see here they are very small. We can call it also arachnoid villi or Passioni granulations. So later you can see here, you can see it here. We're gonna have a crest in which the false cerebri is inserted. This is the frontal crest. And below to this crest, we're gonna have the foramen secum. So it's here. Look at here. Look at here. The foramen secum. This foramen is a passage. It's a way to some small veins. It's gonna be some small veins and some fibrous extension of the false cerebri. Okay. More posterior to this foramen secum, we're gonna have the ethmoid notch. Let me make it in blue. You see here, all this here, this is the ethmoid notch of the frontal bone. On this side of this concavity can be observed some groove carved by the branches of the middle meningeal artery, also the anterior meningeal arteries. Those are the sulci or sulcus arteriosi. Okay, and let's make this groove. I'm gonna show this groove. You can see it here. They're very clear. You see the groove? You see it? You see it? Yes. The groove. Okay. So now we're gonna talk about the orbitonasal portion. So the surface represents the superior wall of the orbit. You see it here. Okay. You see it here also. You can see it here. And look how I passed. Yes, exactly. Look at here. You see? Again, you can see it also here. So this area is separated from the Squamous Frontalis by the supraorbital border or margo supraorbitalis. This portion of the frontal bone presents in the middle line. Again, we're going to start from the middle line to laterally. Okay. So we're going to have here the ethmoid notch. It's rectangular and circumscribed by some irregular surface. It's have an U shape. You see here, it's in U shape, and it's open backward. It's open posteriorly. You see here. Let me make in blue. Again, it's an U shape. Okay. As if you see the movie Transformers, you're gonna see this area. It's made to fit with the ethmoid bone. Okay, when we talk about the ethmoid bone, we're gonna see it how they fit like a transformer. Ethmoid came here. This is the ethmoid, and the frontal bone came here. Okay, it's a transformer. So, in front of the ethmoid notch, it's located a long process. It's called the nasal spine of the frontal bone, or spine frontalis. You can see it here. Let me make the red again. So this nasal spine is a triangular shape. it have three surfaces. The anterior surface. This anterior surface articulate with the posterior surface of the nasal bones. Okay, and the two posterolateral surfaces they articulate with the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone. So here you can see on the side of the nasal spine, at the edge of the ethmoidal notch, we can see these two canals or two holes from the frontal sinus. Okay, this can be here, there inside. Posterolateral to this canal or this hole, we have the frontal cells. You see it here. You see here the cells. You can see here more clear, which are joined with the upper or superior surface of the ethmoid labyrinth. Again, remember the transformer. On this surface, we can have two oblique and anteromedial channels. You can see here. Let's make it in blue, of course. Let's make it blue. You can make one here, one here. You can see here. Okay. So this channel, they transform it in dots when they articulate with the superior surface of the ethmoid labyrinth. They call ethmoidal dots. One anterior and one posterior. They are from the anterior and posterior ethmoidal arteries. Remember, these arteries are a branch of the ophthalmic arteries. So this going to the cavity, okay? They go from the orbit to the cavity. An example is like this. This is the channel. Here, channel. This is the frontal bone. And in red, we have the ethmoid. So when they are together, they become a duct, you see? And the arteries go there. So laterally to this ethmoidal area, there are two triangular concave surfaces. They are smooth and triangular. They're called orbital surface. Anterolaterally, there are a depression called lacrimal gland fossa. We're gonna see it here. Okay. So this area. Okay, no, I put it too medial. It's more, remember, more laterally here. More laterally here. This is the fossa from the lacrimal gland. And then more medially here, you see here this, more medially, there is a small excavation. This is the spina trochlearis, on which the reflection pulley of the superior oblique muscle is inserted. Let's see if we can see it. No, we cannot see it here. Let's clean this one and check it again. So here, the fossa and the spina trochlearis. The superior oblique muscles go here. Make the polea here. Okay, the pulley here. So now if we see the endocranial surface, laterally and posterior to the ethmoid notch, we find the frontal fossa. There are two convex and raw surface. So the surface, they are the superior wall of the orbits, this eminence orbitarius. They are covered by the regular depression. You see here, you see they are not moved at all. You see. They are not smooth at all. You see all this depression, this impression digitalis. All these impressions correspond to the gyrus of the frontal bones. By elongated protrusions separate them from each other, known by the name of cerebral ridge of cranium. Okay, all juga cerebralia. With that, we finish with the surface, and now we need to talk about what divides each other. There are the borders. We're gonna have different borders in the frontal bone. We're gonna have the anterior border or orbito-nasal border. So these orbito-nasal borders separate the squamous frontalis from the orbito-nasal surface. Okay. Present in the center, the orbito-nasal crest, and it's divided into central or nasal portion, which articulate with the nasal bone, you see here. Middle with the nasal bone, and which the frontal apophysis of the maxillary bone laterally articulate. Remember, all this in blue. Here, okay, from the maxillary ascending process or frontal process of the maxillary bone. Okay, and laterally here, let's make it white. You have the supraorbitary border, lateral supraorbitary border here. Okay, here. Okay, maybe white color is not the best. So this supraorbitary border forms on each side the superior edge of the orbital cavity. Each of them, they're blunt medially and sharp laterally, and present approximately 2 or 3 centimeters lateral to the middle line. Middle line, remember? Oh, yes. So middle line, and 2 or 3 centimeters laterally to the middle line. 2 or 3 centimeters. We have what? Remember, we'll talk about it. Exactly, we have the supraorbitary notch or supraorbitary foramen, which give the pathway to the supraorbital vessels and nerves. These supraorbital borders end laterally in the triangular prominence directly downward external orbital apophysis. You remember, you see here? This is the Synomatic process of the frontal bone, which articulate with the superior angle of the Synomatic bone. And here we have the superior or parietal border. Has semicircular shape, and it's articulate with the anterior border of the parietal bone. It's dentate. Yes, it's dentate, and it's cut in bevel shape, in bevel shape. It's articulated with the major wing of the sphenoid bone here, inferiorly here. Okay, the major wing. The posterior border of sphenoid border, you're gonna see it here. The posterior border or sphenoidal border is the boundary between the intracranial surface and the extra or exocranial surface of the orbital surface. In the middle, it's interrupted by the ethmoidal notch. Remember here, and it's articulating almost all its extension with the mineral or lesser wing of the sphenoid. In the union of the posterior edge or posterior border with the superior border, there is a small and triangular surface, which is where the anterior border ends, where converge the 3 borders. You can see it here, this area here, where the 3 borders converge. In the end, we can talk about the frontal sinus. We think some sinus, a cavity full of area inside of the bone. There are usually 2 cavities, and they communicate with the nostril in the middle meatus by the ethmoidal infundibulum. These two both sinus are separated by we have a inside of the bone we have this thin and anteroposterior septum. Okay, usually the measures of by medium term is 2 to 2.5 centimeter. Okay, height, and 2.5 to 3 centimeter wide. So with that we finish with the frontal bone.